What's up guys, it's Kristen here today with my review of Persepolis, the graphic novel written by Marjane Satrapi. Now, as I said, this is a graphic novel, but it is the story of Marjane's life. It is written in two parts. Part 1 is called The Story of a Childhood, and Part 2 is called The Story of a Return. Usually if you buy them now, though, they are bound up together in one edition, and they were originally written in French, so Part 1 was translated by Mattias Ripa, and Part 2 is translated by Ferris, but all of it was illustrated by Marjane herself. So Marjane was born in 1969 in Tehran, the capital of Iran, and in 1979, as most people know, the country went through an Islamic revolution. So she was 10 years old at the time, and that is where the first book starts, at the beginning of the revolution, and it details her experiences up until the age of 12, almost 13, when it becomes too dangerous for her to stay in the country anymore because of the war that is going on, and so her parents sent her away to live in Europe, and that is where Part 2 picks up, and Part 2 follows her all the way from that age all the way up into her early 20s, when she eventually has to leave Iran for good and goes to live in France. Now, prior to reading Persepolis, I had a very good understanding of what happened in the Iranian Revolution in 1979, as I graduated in political science, so I really understood all of the different political factions and the motivations behind the revolution and the timeline of events. But reading this in the eyes of a, at the beginning, 10-year-old girl all the way through her teenage years, you cannot fully understand how horrific the events were for the people of Iran and their experiences. And the whole time reading it, I just kept thinking how I would have reacted as a 10-year-old child or a teenage girl, or how I would react if I was her parents and I was trying to protect my child, and how you would try to fight the government as much as you could because you didn't agree what was going on, but there's only so much one person or a group of people can do against such a vast power. So with Part 1, Marjane being obviously only 10 years old, she cannot fully grasp what is going on with the situation, though you understand that her parents are incredibly scared. Her parents were actually very westernized. Her mother did not wear a veil or a hijab. They believed in secularism. They wanted Marjane to get a university education and to have the freedoms to listen to whatever music she wanted or to live her life however she felt. But of course, at the same time, they were not happy with the situation in Iran with the Shah as the ruler, who was more of a dictator. He was being propped up by the West. He was not giving all of the freedoms, but their life was livable at that time. Reading this is honestly like reading a dystopian novel. You cannot believe that this actually happened to people, that they were just going along and living their lives one day, and the next everything seems to turn upside down and their freedoms were just stripped away completely. And then as she goes through her 11, 12, 13 years old, she does understand much more what's happening, but she also wants to live her life as a normal teenager at times, and she still wants the new Michael Jackson album and a pair of Nike shoes and to hang out with her friends and talk about boys. Throughout the first book, the family has a lot of hope that the situation is going to blow over and it's going to go away, but unfortunately it just gets worse to the point where it is not safe for Marjane to be living in the country anymore, and they are so fearful for her that they decide to send her away to Europe, even though it absolutely kills them to let go of their only child. But of course any parent would do whatever they had to keep their child safe. And so that is where the first book leaves off, with her leaving at the airport, and the second part, The Story of a Return, starts with her first arriving in Europe, of course feeling very much like an outsider. She can't speak the language with a lot of people. There is a lot of fear towards the Iranians, and reading this I understood her homesickness so much. I did live in the Middle East for a time, though I was much older than she is, and even for me, in those moments when you are sad and you don't feel well and all you need in the world is to have your family there to give you a hug, and you don't have that, it is just the worst feeling. Eventually Marjane does return to Iran, and she is extremely happy to be back with her family and her friends, but she's also very conflicted and feeling like she's caught between two worlds, and that she can't necessarily relate to them the same way anymore because they haven't had the same experiences for the past several years. On one hand, she feels an extreme amount of guilt that while her family was living in a war zone, she was safely tucked away in Europe, but then also that she went through a lot of difficult things while she was in Europe, and she feels like she can't necessarily complain about them or even talk about them to her family because what they went through was so much worse. And I think this is something that all of us feel at one time or another, the whole first world problem thing. The fact that, yes, you may have gone through something horrible, but there's always somebody else who went through something worse, so you don't have the right to say anything or to complain because look what they had to go through. But of course, I completely disagree. Everybody's feelings are valid. Just because you went through something different doesn't mean you suffered any less, and so she has a lot of trouble coming to grips with that and feeling like she belongs back in her country. And as I said, it does end with her eventually leaving to go live in Europe, and it is so terribly sad because you can tell throughout it that she loves her country of Iran, that she is proud of her heritage, that she wishes that she could live with her family there, but it's just not possible to live under the conditions where she cannot have the freedom to live her life the way that she wants to, and her parents don't want that for her, and so it is very sad in the end that she does have to leave her country. Throughout reading this, I loved that overarching theme of her love for her country, and at one point her uncle, who became a political prisoner, asks her to please remember what they went through and their story, and that's what reading this feels like, a tribute to her family and all of the struggles that many people never hear about. I think this is very important for everybody to read to fully understand the events, as we get such a simplified view in the Western media. They try to make everything black and white and act like the people of Iran want to live this way, when in reality her parents and her family members were fighting throughout this to not have to live under this regime. And you cannot truly understand the current politics in the Middle East until you understand the history going at least 100 years back, especially trying to understand the intense involvement of Western countries in the Middle East and other parts of the world as well, of course. But you will see the direct links to what happened then as now ramifications of what we are seeing today. And then of course humanizing the story and trying to put yourself in someone else's shoes and how you would react as a child, a teenager, a parent, if your entire world was literally flipped upside down overnight. So that is it for my thoughts on the Persepolis graphic memoirs. As always, I would love to hear from anybody who has already read these graphic novels, or if you are interested in reading them, please leave your thoughts in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye!